Hi, I am Hamza Iqbal and welcome back with another dark story to my YouTube channel. Hope you all will be fine, so let's start the story without wasting time. There's a place deep in the woods where few dare to tread, a place untouched by light, where the trees stretch so tall and thick that even the sun struggles to pierce the canopy. It's called Hollow's Edge, a place whispered about by the locals of the nearby town. Most don't go near it, but there are always a few brave souls who wander into the forest, eager to uncover its secrets, or perhaps run away from their own. It was late autumn when I first heard the stories. I was new to the town, having moved into a small cabin on the outskirts. The silence of the woods around me was comforting at first, but I soon realized it was unsettling, too. One evening at the local diner, I overheard a group of old men speaking in hushed tones, their voices low and conspiratorial. I wasn't one to eavesdrop, but their conversation piqued my curiosity. "They say it's the shadow that stalks them," one of the men said, his voice thick with fear. "The one in the woods. It waits until you're alone, then it follows you. You can't see it, not at first, but it's always there, watching, waiting, and don't go near Hollow's Edge," another man added, his face pale, as if recalling something painful. "Whatever you do, don't go there at night." I had heard rumors before, of course, tales of strange creatures or cursed places, but something in their voices told me this was different. They weren't just telling stories to frighten the younger generation. There was a deep, almost primal fear behind their words. Later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A chill ran down my spine as I stared out the window at the dark silhouette of the woods. For the first time since moving here, I felt uneasy. The next day, despite the warnings, I decided to go for a walk in the woods. I had always loved the solitude of nature, and the town seemed small and suffocating. Maybe it was just the isolation of the cabin that had gotten to me. Or maybe I was just too curious for my own good. I set out early in the afternoon, taking a trail that wound through the trees and eventually led to a clearing. The autumn leaves crunched beneath my boots, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine. For a while it was peaceful. The birds sang overhead, and the wind whispered through the branches. I felt at ease, alone but not lonely. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, something changed. The atmosphere grew heavy, oppressive. The woods, which had once seemed inviting, now felt suffocating, like they were closing in on me. I stopped walking and looked around. The trees were tall and ancient, their twisted roots crawling along the ground like something alive. I tried to ignore the creeping unease that started to gnaw at my stomach. It was just the fading light, I told myself. The woods could play tricks on you, especially when you were alone. That's when I heard it. A rustling sound, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing second. At first, I thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or a fox. But the sound wasn't coming from the underbrush. It was coming from above, from the trees. I squinted up at the canopy, but saw nothing. The rustling stopped. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then, I saw it. A shadow moved between the trees. It was a dark, shifting shape, too large to be a bird and too fluid to be a person. It flitted from one tree to the next, vanishing and reappearing as if it were darting between the trunks, always just out of reach. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just the shadow of something real. It was a shadow of nothing, an absence in the world that shouldn't exist. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow moved again, closer this time. It was moving toward me. I could feel its presence now, heavy and cold, pressing in from all sides. Without thinking, I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I would see it, whatever it was, closer than before, lurking just at the edge of my vision. My feet stumbled over the uneven forest floor, my heart thundering in my ears. The shadow was still there, following me, always just out of sight. I could feel its pull, like an invisible force drawing me deeper into the woods. I sprinted blindly through the trees, my breath ragged, until I crashed into something solid. The air around me thickened, and the ground felt as though it was shifting beneath my feet. I looked up, startled, and saw a wall of trees in front of me, a thick, nearly impenetrable cluster of trunks. I had gone off the path. Panic set in as I realized I was lost. The shadow, or whatever it was still out there, and now it was closing in. I spun around, trying to find any sign of the path, but everything looked the same. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The rustling sound from earlier returned, growing louder, but this time it was no longer distant. It was right behind me. I whipped around, my eyes scanning the darkness. There, in the shadows of the trees, I saw it. The outline of a figure, tall and unnaturally thin. Its form was indistinct, shifting, like smoke swirling in the wind. But its eyes, I saw those clearly. Two glowing red orbs that burned into mine. It didn't move. It just watched, waiting. My legs felt like they were made of stone. My feet refused to budge, frozen in place by the overwhelming sense of dread that washed over me. Suddenly, it took a step forward, then another. Each movement was slow and deliberate, and with each step it took, the air around me grew colder, heavier. I was no longer sure if I was still in the real world, or if I had somehow slipped into something darker. I turned to run again, but my feet betrayed me. I stumbled and fell, my body crashing against the hard ground. The shadow was upon me now, its presence suffocating, pressing down on my chest. I gasped for air, but it was like I was drowning. I closed my eyes, bracing for whatever came next. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the forest floor. The shadows had vanished. The air was thick with silence, and the only sound was the distant rustling of the wind in the trees. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented and trembling. The forest around me felt unchanged, but I knew something had shifted. The dread that had gripped me just moments before was gone, but the memory of those eyes, the burning red eyes, still lingered in my mind. I stumbled back toward the trail, heart still racing. I didn't look back. It wasn't until I reached the safety of my cabin that I allowed myself to breathe. The door slammed shut behind me, and I bolted it. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. The image of the shadow haunted my dreams, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw those red eyes staring back at me from the darkness. The next day, I asked the locals about Hollow's Edge again, but none of them would speak about it. The men at the diner avoided eye contact when I mentioned it, their faces paling as if they knew something I didn't. They all seemed to know the truth, but no one would say it aloud. The woods weren't just haunted by some forgotten spirit. They were cursed by a darkness far older and more dangerous than anyone dared acknowledge. And I had seen it. I had come too close to it, and now it was following me.